Welcome to Practice Diary number 2. What you've just seen there is a short warm-up I've done for myself, 35 minutes or thereabouts. It's about 25 past 10 in the morning, absolutely freezing outside, and I've developed over the last few weeks a nice warm-up routine for myself that tackles a few different things at once. So I'll just talk you through what I did there, which you saw a bit of there. I begin working on my weaker left hand, specifically the fulcrum. So I'm using a 30-second note triplet figure from the Snare drum virtuoso from the weak hand study. It's a 2-bar figure. With the accent on the beat and the accent off the beat, and it's running through 30-second note triplets followed by or preceded by an accent. And it's really quite difficult. It really forces the fulcrum to be strong. It forces the fingers to be engaged. And at around 40 BPM where I practice this, it's really quite uncomfortable. So I begin doing 50 bars of that, 1 bar of on the beat, 1 bar of off the beat, so 25 of each. That generally takes me about 5 minutes. Then I do a single stroke routine. I start at round about 93, 94 BPM, and I play single strokes beginning with my weaker left hand, and I play 25 bars of 16th notes, 25 bars of quintuplets, 25 bars of sextuplets, and then about 15 to 20 bars of septuplets, and then the remainder of 30-second notes. Depending on how good the septuplets feel, I might go into the 30-second notes for 15 bars or maybe only 5 bars, depending on how I feel. And then I repeat the same process again for double strokes. So you just saw all of that there just in a few snippets at the beginning because it's not particularly interesting to watch. And then I repeat the whole sequence again. I go back to the single-handed passage, I do the single strokes a second time, and I do the double strokes a second time. And the second time through for each of them, I increase the tempo. And the idea is the first time through is literally a warm-up. It is -2 degrees outside, there's frost on the ground, I'm physically cold. You know, my muscles are not warmed up, I'm not quite focused yet, so it is just a warm-up, literally a warm-up. Once everything is starting to flow nicely and I've got into the swing of things a little bit, when I increase the tempo, the focus is there. I'm actually, the second time through, focusing much more on the technique, focusing much more on the execution. And I didn't film it there because it's not very interesting to watch, but the second time through, even though it was a little faster, everything was far more concise, far more controlled, and came through much better. And I think at the end you just saw the final double stroke roll, the last few bars I did, which was at 100 BPM, just finishing off with some 30-second notes. Again, always leading with that weaker left hand. So it's quite a challenge, but it's very important to do because it helps me correct any particular technical issues I may be having, any issues with my grip, it gets my fingers working, it gets me in the right mindset and everything like that. What I'm aiming to do today is continue working on one of my march pieces here. And I'm at a really interesting point with it because, at least insofar as the first few sections are concerned, I can play it at tempo or roundabout. I haven't decided on the final tempo yet, but roundabout. But the performance is not there yet. So it's a really interesting case where the execution is there, but the performance is not ready yet. So I'm going to be looking at both of those aspects today. So this is a march piece in the time signature of 6/8. Let me just change my metronome. Now, we're in 6/8 here, and I have a number of march pieces in 6/8. 6/8 lends itself very well to the march, as I'll discuss in another video. Now, there are essentially 2 ways to feel 6/8. We can feel the dotted 8th note, 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, or we can feel the 8th note itself, 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now, of course, with the latter, there would be an argument to place it in the time signature of 3/4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. But despite feeling the 8th note, we're still feeling 2 predominant beats of the bar, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So there's a sort of polyrhythmic play effect here. And in the piece in question that I'm working on here, it switches between the two. So we have passages that feel the dotted eighth note, dagga da dagga da dagga da dagga da dagga da dagga da da, and then we have passages that feel the eighth note, dagga 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 da dagga da dagga da dagga da dagga 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 dagga, and you can hear the metric shift there, even though the time signature remains 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6, two predominant emphasis points in the bar. Now, as I say, the execution is there. The performance is not. So one of the things I'm going to be focusing on today is bringing out the accents, because the idea behind these march pieces is they are relatively simplistic in their structure, relatively simplistic in their accent passages, but quite complex in the density, quite complex in the actual figures themselves. So what I'm going to do to begin with, the target tempo is dotted quarter note at 88. I'm going to play around about 60, and I'm just going to have a full run through to sort of set my mind in gear, to put myself in the right mindset, to refamiliarize myself with the piece and see where I feel I'd like to work today. And in my metronome here, I'm feeling the eighth note. Da, 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 da. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. So everything's feeling quite nice, actually. 60 out of 88 is around about 70%, something like that, 70-75% tempo. Everything's feeling really good. So what I'm going to do now, because I'm at the point where the execution is there, I'm going to start tackling section by section at the target tempo. Now, as I say, currently that's at 88. That might slow down a little bit because there are some quite dense figures in there. But that's the purpose of today's practice session. I want to see if 88 is doable, if it feels possible, if it feels comfortable, and if the piece still actually has enough time to breathe at 88. Because of the density of some of the figures, some of the rolls, that's actually very, very fast. So we'll see. So the first section is 16 bars long, and it's got a first and second time bar. So it's basically the same 8-bar section twice with a different last bar each time. So I'm going to just try that at 88. And see how that feels. So the execution is there, as I say. That felt relatively comfortable. I've just done a half-hour warm-up, so things are feeling good. The problem is that those first 8/16 bars are probably the easiest in the piece. And I was probably, even though that was relatively comfortable, I was right on the limit of comfort and confidence there. And I want to make sure that those accents are coming through because of the compositional nature of this piece, like all of the marches I'm working on. The accents have to come through the most. So I'm just going to try that again, but I'm going to maybe drop it to... I'm just going to drop it to 80 and see what that does to the overall effect and see if it makes it a little bit easier for the accents to come through. Certainly easier. I'll probably go back and listen to those a little later on and keep trying and decide. Maybe I'll fit somewhere in between. So that first section is feeling pretty good now. From a practice perspective, I want to sort of get across conceptually that I'm now focusing on the performance. I'm not at this stage focusing on a particular technique. I'm not doing exercises or drills outside of that warm-up I've already done. My focus now is on working on the piece to bring it up to the performance stage, because in about 9 months' time, I'm going to be recording this piece alongside 9 others with a percussive accompaniment. There's a bass drum accompaniment to all of this, marching bass drum. So I need to be able to play it, perform it properly. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next section now. 3, 6. It's another 8-bar section that turns into a 16-bar section with a second time bar. I'm going to do what I did a moment ago. I'm going to start at 8T. I'm going to stay at 8T. This has got some slightly more intricate phrasing in, so I'm just going to see how this feels. This is a sort of fact-finding mission at the tempo to see where I am with it. But we're in a really interesting position here, actually, because I can hear the figure that it's supposed to be. I can hear how it's supposed to sound, but I've got an execution problem, because in the second beat of the second bar, and same again in the 4th bar and the 6th bar, there is a 30-second note triplet starting on the left hand that leads into the accent. Now you can hear there from that phrase, the accent is in the same place both times, the second 16th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the phrase that's trying to come across. And the second time we do that 30-second note triplet, the frise of 4, at the beginning is just a decoration. It's a variation on that theme. And you can hear, if I pull it off nicely, if it's well executed, the accent is still the focus point. What I don't want to happen is that triplet at the beginning to take the emphasis away from the accent. So what I'm just going to work on for a few minutes here is that bar itself, and focusing on keeping the 30-second note triplet very, very low. So this is what's called non-contextual practice. I'm now taking that bar out of the piece and I'm focusing it on its own, focusing on its own with a technical focus, with an execution focus. So I'm going to do this really, really slowly. Let's just go for something nice and rounded. I'll go for 50 bars of repetition on this. I'll probably go down about 60 BPM here. So quite a sloppy 50 repetitions there. The problem I was having was not actually to do with the execution, but hearing the phrase against the click. My metronome is still set on 8th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I was struggling to hear the syncopated 16th notes within that, especially the 30-second note triplet. And I think I was rushing the 30-second note triplet, and that was throwing me out of sync with the metronome. So that was actually a timing issue. Now that's all going to have knock-on effects when I come to play this faster. That problem of timing is going to amplify. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually take this back into a contextual point where I'm going to play the section as a whole and try and make the section coherent, because if I can hear that phrase strongly enough, execution is going to be easier as well. So I'm going to try the whole section this time, and I think I might drop the tempo just a little bit. I might go down to 55 or something like that. Okay, so starting to feel a little better, a little bit more familiar. Let's knock that back up to 65 now, so 10 BPM further on from where I am now, and see if we can get that feeling just as comfortable at the 65 marking. Okay, so again, now the execution is starting to feel a little bit more consistent. I could already play that phrase. I mean, don't misunderstand what's just happening here. I've not just learnt that from nothing in the last 2 minutes. I'm already familiar with this piece. I can already play it. I am really trying now to refine and focus the performance aspect. Now that execution is a little bit more under my hands, I've just focused on it for a few minutes. I want to revisit this concept of making the accents come through. So I'm going to knock the tempo up again. I want to start approaching the performance tempo here. I'm going to jump to 75. And my focus is especially making that accent come through. This has to swing. This has got to have a swinging feel to it. So I'm trying to maintain that feel while I'm trying to make the execution clean as well. Starting to get there now. I'm going to put the tempo back up to 80 BPM and I'm going to see if I can transition from the first section into the second. So this will be a 32 bar segment. Okay, so it is there. It is there, and it's certainly doable at 80. It remains to be seen if it's doable at 88. The reason I wanted to do a bigger section that time is because when you're listening as on the macro level, you don't always hear it the same way as when you're focusing on it in the micro scale, on the micro scale. When I'm just doing that one bar or that one passage, my mind is very focused on what that particular passage sounds like. When I'm coming from a previous section, I've got the previous section in my mind, I know what that sounds like, and then I'm having to hear that new section, the difficult part, in a new context. And that's actually what I experienced there. Again, this is not a question of execution. It's a question of hearing the figure and expressing that figure musically. When I got to the section in question, I was like, oh yeah, that's what it sounds like. Your mind starts to think, wait, how's this sound? Ah, that's how it sounds. And the more familiar you are with the piece, contextually as a whole, the less that is going to happen, and the more confident I can be when I work my way through the piece that it's actually going to sound the way I want it to sound. Right, let's see how this second section, third section, 1, 2, 3, 16. All right, so this is a 16 bar section straight through. No repeats on this one. So I'm going to knock it back down to 60 just to begin with and see how this feels at 60. Okay, so execution is fine. As you may have picked up there, this piece is all about the syncopated accents. And the problem is, from an execution standpoint, 60 is really comfortable. From hearing the accent figure, it's not fast enough because this was written with a certain tempo in mind. So I now need to increase the tempo to make sure I can maintain the execution while actually hearing that accent pattern coming up. I know you can't see it, but especially down here at the bottom of the first page up to the second page, there is this syncopated, almost polyrhythmic accent pattern happening that only really makes sense at a faster tempo. So I'm going to try this at, let's go up to 75 and see if we can maintain that degree of execution, but express the accent pattern clearly enough. It's also worth noting we're at MP here, mezzo piano, so I'm really trying to keep the stick heights low as well, which just adds to the fun. So it's coming. I can hear it. But it only kicks in around about bar 5 of that section. So when I loop back round to the start of this 16 bar section, I have to kind of switch my mind back into a different metric feel. And that's proving a little bit awkward. But as we get up here onto the second page, I really feel like I'm hearing that accent pattern flow nicely now. There's almost this polyrhythmic effect. It's this really delayed, syncopated accent pattern that should sort of float across the surface all the while. Again, to clarify, I am purposefully doing this faster than I'm comfortable because the issue is not in my execution. I need to be able to hear it this fast. I'm actually just going to knock it up to 80 now just to see how this all feels, to see if I can maintain that level of execution and still hear the accent pattern. So really the whole focus here is on familiarity. Familiarity through repetition. And you may have noticed at times there, I would make a small mistake and then I'd go back and I'd check it, try again, just that particular mistake. Just at the end there was a transition from a triplet into 16th notes back into a triplet of a different sticking. And it's interesting how the first 20 times you do that, it doesn't trip you up, but then suddenly it trips you up, and then it trips you up the next 10 times in a row. So it's interesting how the brain works, but this is all familiarity. This is all helping me learn the piece on a really intimate level, so I can actually anticipate what's coming. I'm not sight reading it, I'm anticipating it. I'm probably not going to be able to memorize all of these note for note, but it will get to the point where you only use the music as a prompt. But I'm not at that stage yet. I'm still halfway between using it just as a prompt and still having to read it. But the more I did it there, the more I was starting to hear that accent phrase come through. This is the telling thing, though, because I want to be able to sing the accent phrase to you so you can hear what I'm going for, but I can't yet. And the fact that I can't sing it suggests that I don't know it well enough. So over the course of my practice over the next week or so, I'll be doing more of the same and trying to get to the point where I'm familiar enough with each section that I could sing the underlying accent phrase. But it's just not quite solidified yet that I wouldn't feel confident in singing it. So I'm going to leave it there. I started at 10 to 10 and it's now 5 past 11. I'm going to do a little bit more myself, but you don't need to see that necessarily. Just to finish off this section, I'm going to have a go at the whole piece at 80, just to see how I go. I can't promise it will be without mistakes. In fact, I'm almost certain it will be with mistakes, but I just want to see how I'm getting on with it, and it's a bit of fun. Gives you an idea, but more importantly at this stage it gives me an idea of where I'm at with it all. It's increasing my familiarity with it, and the more repetitions, the more familiar I get with it, the closer I will get to the performance stage. I just want to finish clarifying the practice concept here, because there are different stages of practicing. And many of us, when we are new musicians, are taught that we must practice very, very slowly. We are taught we must practice with repetition. And of course, I've talked about these things at great length. Of course, slow, correct repetition is a vitally important part of practicing. But that's when we're practicing something we are trying to technically achieve, some execution. Here, my focus has changed. I can play the piece. I know I can play the piece. I can't play it perfectly, But the reason I can't play it perfectly is mainly to do with performance related aspects and not necessarily technique or execution related aspects. Of course, those two things are often linked. So here I'm jumping around tempos depending on what I'm trying to achieve. Am I trying to convey the accent pattern, in which case I'm playing a little faster to try and hear it? Am I trying to smooth out a transition, in which case I'm going to drop the tempo and I'm going to repeat further to focus on the execution of that transition? So really we have to adapt our practice, I should say, to suit what it is we are trying to achieve. And as I said at the beginning, today I am trying to achieve a higher degree of performance rather than working on one particular bar that I can't play or learn something fresh. I've been familiar with this piece since I started writing it, so I know it very well, but I don't know it enough to perform. So that's essentially what I'm working on here. So please don't think that my practice is either all exercises or all playing fast and repeating the same section of a song. It's all dependent on what I'm trying to achieve, and I will adapt it depending on that goal. So I hope that gives you a few insights into what I'm doing, a few things to think about with regards to your own practice. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'd love to talk to you all about this material or about practice concepts in generally. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Good luck in your own practice, and I'll see you next time.